right, so if you've spent any time down here in Florida, or maybe even just heard stories, you've probably bumped into the term Florida cracker.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, these days, for a lot of folks born here, especially families with really deep roots, it's actually a term of pride.
It really is.
But let's be honest, if you're new to it, hearing Florida cracker, well, it can definitely make you pause, right?
Yeah, it can raise an eyebrow. It sounds
Yeah.
a bit perplexing, maybe.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's get past those sort of surface assumptions and really dig into the surprisingly true historical origin of this term.
And that's exactly what we're aiming for in this deep dive.
Hmm.
Our main guide today is this really great piece from the St. Pete Wiki. It's called Florida Crackers. Here's the beef, and it's by Matthew Bain.
Okay.
So we're going to peel back the layers, look at the real story behind the name, and show how it ties right into Florida's early economy. And even, connects to specific places like Pinellas County, even downtown St. Pete. Basically, we want to give you the shortcut to knowing what's really behind the name.
Yeah.
It's probably not what you think.
Yeah, I bet. Now, when I first heard Florida cracker, my mind kind of went to a couple of things. I sort of wondered, was it about someone, like, cracking open a tough life here? Pioneers breaking ground.
It's a common thought.
Or maybe farmers cracking corn. For moonshine or cornbread, given Florida's rural history. Did you ever think along those lines?
Oh, absolutely. Those are very logical, educated guesses. You're definitely not alone there.
Okay.
But here's the thing. According to our source, those popular ideas, they're actually not it.
Really?
Yeah. It's got nothing to do with, say, the Cracker Barrel restaurant chain, despite the name.
Right. Good clarification.
And it's also much more specific than just being a general term for any Florida pioneer. There's a very distinct origin.
Okay, so here's the part that really kind of blew my mind. And I think it will for a lot of you listening, too.
Yeah. Picture this. Cattle ranching. Huge herds. Right here in Florida. Long before anyone was thinking about cowboys and cattle drives out west, like in Wyoming or Texas.
It's a huge historical reframe, isn't it?
It totally is.
It really is. The history of cattle in Florida goes back, well, way further than most people realize. We're talking 1539.
Wow.
Hernando de Soto's expedition, exploring for Spain, he actually brought cattle and horses with him then.
Okay.
And then just a year later, 1540, there was this resupply herd meant for De Soto near Pensacola. They never connected.
Oh,
And a lot of those cattle just escaped, wandered off into the woods, the timber of North Florida.
wild cattle just like that.
Exactly. Then fast forward to 1565, St. Augustine gets founded.
Right.
And they imported more Spanish cattle, this time specifically to set up a ranching industry for the new colony.
So it was intentional then.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is how quickly Florida became this early, pretty significant hub for cattle.
By 1700, that's a full 75 years before the American Revolution estimates put the cattle numbers around 20,000 head roaming Florida.
20,000
That
early.
Yep. That's the really mind-blowing part, I think. It completely flips that script we have about cattle ranching starting out west. Florida was first.
So, okay, you've got all these thousands of cattle wandering around. Someone's going to manage them, right? Drive them. The cowboys.
Right.
But like I said, when I think cowboy, it's wide open plains, roping cattle with a lasso.
The classic image.
Totally. How did these Florida guys do it in what sounds like, dense woods and swamps? Were they using lassos somehow?
That's a great question because it really gets to the heart of what made Florida unique.
Yeah.
See, the terrain here, the range, it was often thick jungle or dense saw palmetto scrub or heavily wooded pine forest.
Not exactly lasso territory.
Not at all. Lassos were basically useless in that kind of environment.
So what did they do?
Instead, these early Florida cattlemen used a very specific tool. It was a long whip, sometimes 10, maybe 12 feet long.
A whip?
Yeah, usually made of braided leather. And they were incredibly skilled at using it. When they cracked it just right, it made this really distinctive, loud crack sound.
Yeah. The crack.
Exactly.
That.
That whip and that sound, that was their main tool for managing cattle in Florida's tricky landscape. They guided the herds with sound, not rope.
Wow. That's clever.
It really shows the ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
Adapting to this totally unique environment. It created a whole different kind of cowboy, a different way of working cattle.
Okay, so we've got the cattle established way back. We've got these unique whip-cracking cowboys. How does all that actually lead to the name cracker? And why should we care today? Let's bring it forward a bit, maybe to when the U.S. took over Florida.
Right. So when the U.S. acquired Florida from Spain in 1821, the place was described as basically a vast, untamed wilderness, plentifully stocked with wild cattle.
Okay. Still lots of cows.
Loads. And this cattle industry, it became the absolute engine of Florida's economy for most of the 1800s.
The main thing.
Pretty much the driving force.
Yeah.
And by 1850, they'd blaze this 120-mile trail right across the state, east-west, from Fort Pierce over to Bradenton. It became known as the Cracker Trail.
The Cracker Trail. Okay, I've heard of that.
Now, it's famous. Now, here's the key moment for the name itself.
Uh-huh.
When people living in the early settlements, maybe near the trail or near the port towns, heard those distinctive whip cracks coming through the woods.
The sound carrying.
Exactly. They'd hear that sound approaching, and they'd literally exclaim, "Here come the crackers."
Ah, just like that.
Just like that. And that's how the term stuck. It came to mean these really intrepid guys who roamed the Florida countryside, herding cattle, often driving them to ports on the Gulf or Atlantic coast for shipment, maybe to Cuba or elsewhere.
So Florida crackers were literally the first cowboys of Florida.
Absolutely. And you could argue, based on the timeline, they were really the first true cowboys in the entire U.S.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And our source even mentions a specific famous one, Bone Mazel, called a great Florida cow hunter. The famous artist Frederick Remington actually painted him.
No kidding, Remington. Wow. Okay, so this is legit history. Now, how does this connect down here to where maybe a lot of us live? You mentioned Pinellas, St. Pete.
Right.
And you talked about free-range cattle earlier. How did that whole system work, especially around here?
Yes, that free-range part is crucial. And it was actually a holdover from British common law.
Okay.
The law basically said that cattle ranchers did not have to fence their cattle in. Instead, if you're a landowner and you didn't want cattle wandering onto your property,
You had to build the fence.
you had to build the fence to keep them out. It was called fencing out law.
Huh. Seems backwards now.
It does to us, yeah. And believe it or not, Pinellas County, this whole area, was a pretty significant cattle ranching part of the state back then.
Really? Down here on the peninsula?
Yep. So naturally, as more people started moving in, building towns like St. Pete, having all these cattle, and apparently hogs too, just roaming free, became, well, a nuisance.
I can imagine. Hogs, too.
Hogs too. And there's a fantastic little anecdote in the source material that really paints a picture. Williams Park, right there in downtown St. Pete.
Yeah, I know it well.
In the 1910s, they actually put up the park's first fence around the entire property. Specifically because of all the cows and hogs that just kept wandering through.
Get out. Cows and pigs in Williams Park in the 1910s.
That's the story. Can you picture trying to enjoy the park and having to, like, shoo away a cow?
That is absolutely wild. My family used to joke about Florida wildlife, but they weren't picturing heifers downtown.
Right. It really shows you that clash,
Mm.
Early city life bumping right up against these older agricultural ways. Something had to give.
So what did give? Florida obviously started shifting hard towards tourism later on. Did the crackers just fade away right off into the sunset?
Well, essentially, yeah, that era did come to an end. The big change came in 1923.
Okay.
That's when the state law finally slipped. The fencing requirement changed. Ranchers were now told, legally, you have to fence your own property to keep your livestock in. Fencing in.
The modern way.
The modern way. Now, you can bet the cattle industry pushed back hard against that.
I'm sure.
But Florida's economy was shifting fast. Tourism was booming. Development was happening. The free-roaming cattle just didn't fit anymore.
Right.
So after giving everyone some time to comply, the city of St. Pete eventually had to deal with the leftover problem.
Which was?
Still some cows wandering around.
Yeah.
So get this. In 1923, the city actually hired 5 honest-to-goodness cowboys.
Hired cowboys. The city.
Yep. Their job was to round up any remaining roaming cattle within the city limits. Those cows would then either be claimed by their owner, if they could find them, or sold off by the city.
Wow. So those 5 guys.
Those 5 cowboys, hired by St. Pete in 1923, they would have essentially been the last Florida crackers in that original traditional cattle driving sense, at least in this area.
That's incredible. Closing a whole chapter.
It really is. And think about the timing.
Yeah.
St. Pete in 1923 was hitting its stride, right? The golden age, building grand hotels, the $1 million pier maybe on the horizon, tourists pouring in by train.
Yeah, the boom times.
And right in the middle of all that city building and tourism focus, they're hiring actual cowboys to chase down stray cows.
That contrast is just Amazing.
It really highlights how fast things were changing, doesn't it? How
Yeah.
quickly one way of life can be overtaken by another.
What a story, seriously. We went from this term Florida cracker that, can sound a bit awkward or confusing today,
Right.
and we've dived back centuries into this really unique Florida cowboy history. It's
It
fascinating.
really is.
Uncovering those aha moments like, wow, cattle here before the West. And the whip, not the lasso, being the key tool, and then finding out the name came literally from people hearing them coming. Here come the crackers.
Exactly, that exclamation.
It totally redefines the term, connects it to this really gritty, specific, and honestly pretty cool piece of Florida's past.
It absolutely does. And maybe just a final thought to leave you with.
Yeah.
Think about how often that happens, right? You have these commonplace names or nicknames for people from a place or local identities.
Yeah.
And they often have these surprisingly deep historical roots. Roots that maybe point to forgotten industries, like cattle ranching here, or unique ways people adapted to their environment, or whole ways of life that have disappeared.
That's a good point.
We use these terms every day, kind of casually, without maybe realizing the weight of the history they carry, the stories packed inside them.
Yeah.
So maybe think about other terms you hear or use, other local names or phrases. What hidden depths, what surprising origins might they have? What other words are just waiting for their own deep dive?